Welcome back, everybody, to LinuxAcademy.com. My name is Terry. In today's course, we continue our preparation for the Linux Professional Institute certification, Level 2, Exam 1. We are in Topic 200 Capacity Planning, specifically 200.2, which is for predicting future resource needs. We're talking about the collectd daemon, which is responsible for gathering usage statistics. So we're going to take a look at a couple of the different files and locations that you might be asked about. And then in our final video for collectd, before we talk about some of the other monitoring solutions that we need to be aware of, we'll set up a display mechanism for a website so that we can view our statistics. And then we'll test that out with one that's been running for a while after we verify that our site is up and running. So what we want to talk about here is we want to talk about resource management. The first being resource management. Of course, if we were wanting to start the collectd daemon, once it had been installed on boot, we would do a check config, and then the check config, of course, would be collectd on. We're not worried about that here, and in fact, normally what I would do at this point is I would do a service, and then collectd and start. But since we haven't installed the other components for displaying it, there's no need for us to start this, although we can go ahead and start the collection so that we can view the information that it's collecting later. So we'll go ahead and start it. And then, of course, if we run the status command, it tells us collectd is running. Now, there's two things I want you to look at. And the first being, if we go to user share collectd, you'll notice that there's a couple of things here, but all we really care about is this typesdb. What is that typesdb? Well, what it is a listing that contains a single line for each dataset specification that is a two-field delimited by a space or tab that says what it is that we're going to get. The first field defines the name of the dataset, and the second field will define the list of data source specifications, and that might be space or comma delimited. It was inspired, as we mentioned in our last video, by the data statistic gathering RRD or RRD tools data source specification. So what does it look like? It's one of the few things that we can look at that's labeled with a .db that's actually just plain text. And you can see what we have here, for example, all of these different values. So what, for example, we know we have the CPU plugin that's currently enabled. So if we cat out type or cat types.db and we grep for CPU, we'll get all of the values that are for our CPU. So our CPU is saying, hey, I want you to derive a value from CPU 0 for utilization. Now, all of that's defined by collectd in terms of what it is, but what you would need to know is that there's a single field that says, here's the plugin or value type of the statistic that we're going to be getting, and here's how we're going to get it. And that's what you need to know, is that this is a two-field specification inspired by the RRD tool data source specification that defines the various data sources types that collectd can gather. Whether the plugin is enabled or not is handled by the plugins section in the collectd.conf that we've already looked at, but the definition of how it does that is here in this typesdb. Once collectd is started, then we have an RRD location, because we have the RRD plugin loaded, that says where the RRD files for any of the systems that we're collecting data for. Now, as part of our configuration, collectd can serve as a daemon to collect data for just the current or local host, this host name, it's installed and gathering data for itself, or it can function as a remote gathering data tool, so it goes out and gets data from other servers, and it can do that from more than one. So you want a location that it can write its RRD data collection files to that then can be read by anything that's responsible for importing them, manipulating them, responding to them, and in our case, in the next video, we'll be installing a display tool for. So if we look at our directory structure, we'll find that if we go to var lib collectd, we'll see there's an rrd directory, and that was loaded as a result from the etc collectd.conf file. And if we grep for rrd, we'll see that when in the plugin for the rrd tool, the data directory is var lib collectd rrd. So this is where it's writing the rrd files. And inside of that, each directory will be named for the host that it's collecting statistics for. So in this case, I happen to be running on a lab server called tcox4.mylabserver.com. And if I go in there, I should see a number of different directories that contain the statistics for the plugins that I've enabled for this particular instance. So if I go into CPU-0, I'll see a number of different RRD files that correspond to the data that I'm gathering for this per system. Idle, interrupt, nice, soft IRQ, steal, system, user, and wait. And similarly, if I go into any of the other directories, I'll see one or more RRD files that will contain that data. Now, the data that's contained in these RRD files, as you can see, is not text. It's a special data format that requires the RRD tool to be able to read correctly. And that's what we're going to do in our next video, is we're going to set up and install everything that we need in order to read and then display using what's called the collectd graph panel. And there's also collectd web and a couple of other things. But we're going to use a simple collectd graph panel that'll just display graphically these particular values. So for predicting future resource needs and understanding how our types are defined and where those data statistic files exist for collectd, that's all there is to it. My name is Terry for Linux Academy.